and Assalamualaikum. My name is Nur Hafizah binti Muhammad Asri, S56147. This video will contain the answer for question A. In preparing a context diagram, we need to draw a single circle or bubble named single transformation process for the first step. And we label it as SNS account payable. Next step is to draw and label the square for the entities named data sources or data sink. Either send data to SNS account payable or receive data from SNS account payable. In this question, there are four entities or data sources, which is purchasing, receiving, management, and vendor. For the first one is purchasing. Second one is receiving. The third one is management. And the last one is vendor. The last step is to connect the data process either from SNS account payable to data sources or destination in square shape, or from the data sources to SNS account payable by using an arrow to flow the data. Based on this question, there are three arrows representing purchase order from purchasing, purchase order, second is receiving report from receiving, the third one is invoice from vendor. And there are two errors representing vendor and management receive data from SNS account payable, which is payment and remittance advice. And the last area is account payable report, which is represent the data from SNS account payable to management. That's all for the answer for question A. Thank you. We continue for the answer for question B. Since this question is the level 0 DFD, we assign each of these process is a real number, with the first digit after the decimal point being a 0. Transforming process is needed in this level 0 DFD, so we place the circle in the order that the data should flow in the process. There are 4 transforming data or transforming process in this question. The first one is record payable. And we assign is 1.0. Second is collect and store purchase order and receiving report. The third one is make payment. And the last one, which is 4.0, prepare management report. Next, we place the data sources and next, we place the data sources or data destination on the level 0 DFD. In this question, there are 5 data sources or destination, which is the first one is vendor, second one is purchasing, the third one is receiving, fourth is vendor again at the end of the process, and the fifth is the management. Based on Ashton explains in this question, the invoice purchasing and receiving are entered the account payable department at different times. So, this document is separated for each type of file. Data stores also required in this question. As a result, we use 2 parallel lines, inserting the name of the data store between the 2 parallel lines. This data store is needed in level 0 DFD to identify the data being sent to or from it. In this question, there are 6 data store has been used, which is first is the account payable, second data store is vendor invoice, third data store is purchase orders, fourth is receiving report, fifth is cash disbursement journal, the last one is pay invoice. Once the transformation process, data sources, and data store are drawn, we need to connect them by drawing an arrow between the appropriate symbols. This arrow represents the data moving or flowing from one process to another and from data sources to transformation process. Based on the question, we have invoice moving from the vendor to the record payable process. To flowing the invoice data out. And that process continue moving the account payable and vendor invoice data stores. From account payable data stores, data has been flowing to make payment process. From account payable data stores, data has been flowing out to make payment process and prepare. From account payable data stores, data has been flowing out to make payment and to prepare management report. In make payment process, there is an arrow showing the data are coming and moving back to account payable. After data moving into prepare management report, the account payable report is leaving the transformation process to data sources, which is management. The account payable report has been flowing out and moving into the management data sources. After the data has reached transformation process, which is make payment process, The data moving out to data stores paid invoice and payment and remittance advice to vendor as a data sources. The data name as payment and remittance advice. For the purchasing and receiving data sources, the purchase order and receiving report has been moving out to collect and stores purchasing order and receiving report. Receiving. Then that process leaving the transformation process to data stores, which is purchase order and receiving report data stores. After that, the data flowing out to make payment process, transformation process. From make payment process, the data moving to paid invoice data, stores and payment and remittance advice from vendor data sources. After all document has been complete, the data stores cash disbursement journal appear from the data moving out from make payment to show that SNS account payable has been updated. That's all for the answer for question B. Thank you. We continue for the answer for question C. There are three major players in this question, which is account payable, Ashton as a controller, and Susan as a owner or manager. To document the function, we need to divide the document flowchart into 3 columns. It is usually best to arrange the columns in the order in which they occur and to use the primary function. The process begins for the external parties, which is the purchasing, receiving, and vendor. A terminal with the term from purchasing, from receiving, and from vendor is placed upper portion of the account payable column. From purchasing, from receiving, and from vendor. Next, 3 document symbols with the word purchase order, receiving report, and vendor invoice printed inside below the terminal symbol. An arrow representing the document flow and the order of operation connect the two symbols. Purchase order, from purchasing, receiving report, from receiving, and vendor invoice, from vendor. And we need to connect with an error. Account payable clerk file a paper document of purchase order and receiving report and indicate that file using A alphabetical. Thus, a manual process with the word record account payable is placed below the invoice document symbol and the two symbols are connected with an arrow. The manual operation will be below under the vendor invoice. This we assign as A to record the document. And for the manual operation document will be record as a record account payable. Then a ledger symbol is placed to the side of manual process and an arrow is used to connect the two symbols. Account payable ledger. A new vendor invoice symbol is drawn below the record invoice symbol. An error also shown that the new record invoice has been moved to paper document file indicate as symbol A alphabetically. New vendor invoice. For the account payable ledger, a manual operation symbol has been prepared and labeled as Prepare Monthly Account Payable. A document symbol appears after the manual operation symbol and labeled as Account Payable Report. And move to paper document file and indicate by date as symbol D. Meanwhile, the file of paper document which indicate as symbol A move to manual operation symbol and labeled as match purchase order receiving report and invoice. Match purchase order orders receiving report and invoice. Then we connect and we connect the A alphabet for the paper document file with the manual operation process. Then the document in manual operation will move to multiple copies of one paper document symbol and represent as purchase order, receiving report, and vendor invoice. vendor invoice, receiving report, and the last one is purchase order. And we connect with the manual operation process. An error appears in the flow to represent the connecting between two symbols. The multiple copies of paper will be moved to connector symbol labeled as A. The connector is used to avoid line creases crossing a page, since the document will be used for action as a controller in controller column. In the account payable cloud, the symbol C appear and move the document to multiple copies of one paper document symbol, represent purchase order, receiving report, vendor invoice, and check too. Two arrows represent the flow connecting to paper document file and indicate with a symbol alphabetically. The document then move out from the multiple paper document and move in to symbol A alphabetically. The document then move out to paper document file and indicate with the symbol A alphabetically. An error is connected between this process. That's for the account payable. We continue for the controller. Since there a connector from account payable clock, Ashton as a controller move out the document from the connector to multiple copies of one paper document symbol, representing purchase order, receiving report, and vendor invoice. And purchase order. Then, from multiple copies of one paper document, the manual operation symbol appear and labeled as prepare vendor checks. Two arrow drawn represent connecting between the symbol. Prepare vendor check. And we We connect them with an arrow. I mean, from the manual operation of prepare vendor check, the document moved to journal symbol and labeled as cash disbursement journal. An arrow also shows the document from manual operation move out to multiple copies of paper document symbol represent purchase, order receiving report, vendor invoice, check 1 and check 2. Then, the document will be placed on one page connector symbol represented by B to connect the flow on the same page since the same document will be forwarded to Susan as a owner or manager in owner or manager column. We continue for the owner and or manager column. Susan, as a owner or manager, received the document that has been placed in B from Ashton. Move out the document to multiple copies of the one paper document, which is purchase order, receiving report, invoice vendor, check 1 and check 2. Then the document will send to manual operation symbol that label as review and sign check. An error will be represent for the all the document flow. Review and sign check. After that, the document will separate with two errors, which is document for check 1 that finish to the vendor terminal. The second error move the document to the multiple copies of one paper document, which is purchase order, receiving report, vendor invoice and check 2, and will be placed in C symbol as a connector. Check 1 to the terminal for to vendor. And another error will be moved to the multiple copies of one paper document. And will be placed in C symbol in as a connector. The document in this symbol of account payable clerk will be reviewed by Susan, and then that document will be reviewed in manual operation report named Review Account Payable Report. As last will be placed at paper document 5D. That's all for the question C. Thank you.